Hey everyone, so you should have already watched the crash course video that was basically a review of 10th grade and what you learned last year about World War I, causes of it, kind of the style of warfare, as well as kind of who was on what side and those basic bits of information. The United States does get into the war, but we get into it really late. It's already been going on for nearly 4 years before the United States gets involved. So what we're going to be focusing on is how America gets involved in World War I, kind of what our particular role is going to be, as well as looking at the events that are going to actually push America into this essentially European war. So next class we'll be looking at how the war actually affects Americans. So today we're just starting the first part of this particular lecture of America in World War I and really how America enters into the war itself. So as soon as the war in Europe begins, immediately the United States under Woodrow Wilson says, we're neutral, we're not involved, it's not our problem, we're not sticking our nose in anyone's business, we are going to be neutral and isolationist within this conflict. However, that was our official stance. Personally, most Americans supported the Allies. Now, there were a lot of kind of separations in the US. For example, people of German heritage tended to support the Central Powers, as well as people of Irish heritage supported the Central Powers because generally of their hatred of England. But the majority of average Americans did support the Allies in the war. And so even though the country's official neutrality kind of kept us out of the war, the American public already clearly had taken sides. For American business, this was actually a great opportunity for them because when Europe is at war, one, they're not trading with each other. So that means that the United States can step in and trade with both sides, as well as the fact that the United States is going to be able to take advantage of this situation because while they're at war, they're not making anything. So that means that we can step in and be provider of those goods that typically these countries might have made for themselves. In the war, American banks loaned over $2 billion to the Allied powers. They saw them as not only in their eyes the better bet, but also they were the country that tended to trade with us more frequently. And so we wanted to keep that good relationship. But that meant that we needed the Allies to win in order to get paid back. So the first event that starts to push America towards going to war in this European battle is the sinking of the Lusitania. You might have learned about this last year, so it should seem somewhat familiar to you. So the Lusitania was a British passage liner. It was basically like a giant cruise ship that took people from America to Europe and back again. So, we don't have airplanes that can do that type of flight yet, so that's how people got across the ocean. Well, the Lusitania was sunk by a German U-boat. The German submarine, or they called them the Untersee boats, undersea U-boat, it sunk the passage liner, and unfortunately there were 128 Americans that were on board that were killed when the passage liner was sunk. Now, we were not the targets of this. However, a lot of Americans wanted to go to war over it because, it's not okay. 128 Americans were killed and we can't just let that slide. So President Wilson is going to issue something called the Sussex Ultimatum. So an ultimatum is either you do this or this is the consequence kind of situation. So a really bad example would be you better get me something nice for Christmas or we're breaking up. That's an ultimatum. So what Wilson said is to Germany, you have to cease your unrestricted submarine warfare. You have to stop this kind of just torpedoing of any ship that's in your enemy's waters, because many of these ships are not military ships. They're civilian ships. It's innocent people that are on board. You're not allowed to do this. And if you continue to do it, the United States will have to intervene. Germany didn't want America in the war. And so initially they agreed and they were like, okay, we won't use the submarine warfare. But then they immediately reneged on it. They went back on that because hello, that's the whole purpose of a submarine, is to sneak up on people and to, to attack them. Essentially what we said in the Sussex ultimatum was they had to announce to the ship that they were going to attack, hey guys, guess what? We're going to attack you. So, here it's coming. That's totally going against the idea of what a submarine's all about. So they agreed, and they immediately went back on their word, and they continued torpedoing ships around Britain. So Wilson then tells the American public, well, we told them they shouldn't have done that, and just, don't go on any British ships. Well, that's not really great for the American public, and overall Americans are kind of angry that Germany went back on this decision. However, they do like that America wasn't necessarily getting pulled into the war. Wilson runs on the re-election campaign slogan of, he kept us out of war, which is kind of funny because America would actually enter the war just a couple of months later. And that event would be the Zimmermann telegram that brought us into it. So in January of 1917, the German Foreign Secretary, a guy by the name of Arthur Zimmermann, sent a confidential, secret encoded telegram to be given to the German ambassador living in the United States. So the German ambassador in the United States was supposed to pass this secret message along to the German ambassador living in Mexico. So they were kind of doing this like pass along the message, pass along the message. The telegram was outlining this plan that was going to have propose an alliance between Mexico and Germany against the United States. And they said to Germany or to Mexico that if they were, if America gets into the war, if Mexico keeps America busy, if Mexico keeps America fighting here on the North American continent rather than allowing America to go to Europe to fight the war, that when they won, Germany would give Mexico back all of the territory that it had lost in the Mexican-American War, including Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. However, the British intercepted the message. And the British sent the message over to the United States, and it was made public. And it was not only horribly embarrassing to the Germans, but it caused the American public to demand that we go to war, that we were not willing to stand by while Germany directly attacked us. Now, they didn't attack us with bombs, they didn't attack us with torpedoes, but they planned on bringing America into the war. So it's kind of like, if you want us in the war, fine, you got us in the war. Mexico did not side with Germany. They kind of stayed out of it because they didn't want to get, pulled into this mess. And the United States does now want to go to war. So Woodrow Wilson goes in front of Congress and he asks for a war declaration because remember, the president doesn't get to declare war. He is the commander-in-chief once we are in a war, and he is the ultimate authority when it comes to military issues, but he does not get to declare war himself. It's Congress that has to declare war. So he gives a speech in front of Congress asking them for this approval. And this is one portion of the speech, and it's incredibly important the way that he phrased it. He said, "The world must be made safe for democracy. The United States has no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind. It is a fearful thing to lead this great and peaceful people into war, into the most terrible and disastrous of all wars, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. But we shall fight for the idea which we have always carried nearest in our hearts, for democracy." And at that point, the people of Congress rose to their feet, clapping, applauding, cheering, because they were ready to send America into war. Afterwards, Woodrow Wilson was quoted as saying to his secretary, "My message today was a message of death for our young men. How strange it seems to applaud that." And that's exactly what it was, because please remember, this war's been going on for almost 4 years. We've been watching the entire time. We know how bad this war is. So the fact that people were applauding it with such gusto was kind of surprising. Now, not everybody was on board, however. Because although Wilson believed that this war was being fought for democracy to support and protect those liberties and justices that we as a country have always protected, not everybody was on board. And a great example of that is Jeanette Rankin. She was important for two big reasons. One, she is the very first woman in Congress. She was actually elected from the state of Wyoming. So yay, Wyoming did something cool for once. But she also was important because she voted against both world wars. And she, among many of the others that were part of the group against America's entrance into the World War, were citing Washington's farewell address as their justification. They said, when Washington left office, he warned us about getting involved in other countries' issues. He told us we should be isolationist. He warned us against the problems of permanent alliances, and that if we get pulled into this war, that it can hurt the United States for a long time, that this is not our job, it's not our war, this is a European conflict and we need to stay out of it. However, Wilson's belief in the support of democracy and the belief of many average Americans who believed that this was not only a just war for us to be involved in, but that it also was justified because we have been inadvertently attacked by, or secretly attacked through the Zimmermann telegram by Germany, and who was trying to plot against us, that we had the justification to go into the war. So what we're going to be looking at next class is exactly what it did have an effect on here in the United States, how Americans got involved in the war, their interests, as well as how it did have both positive and also very negative effects on the American public. So we'll get to that next class.